I'm Johnny Buchanan. Now, in a previous episode, we began to explore the idea of turning the reverbs in our tracks into active track elements by bouncing them down as audio files, bringing them into our projects, and then beginning to have fun with them, slicing them up, doing various things to them, thinking about treating them with audio effects, all kinds of things. And what we did was to do that in a percussive context. I took a drum beat, put it into a reverb, brought that reverb into my project and began to think about that audio file percussively, turning it into a series of slices with little fades ins and fades out so I could enhance the kind of groove of my track with a kind of active reverb element. What we're going to do in this video is to take that idea a little bit further, the idea of taking reverbs again and making them track elements, but this time actually turning them into musical instruments, to see what we can make out of reverbs that already exist within our tracks. Yes? Makes sense? Well, while you're contemplating that, let's have a listen to this track that I've prepared. We're going to be rebranding the channel as Groovy Wednesdays, if this stays the kind of new benchmark for what groove can be on a Wednesday. Okay, enough of that. This is the sound that we're going to be focusing our attentions on. Now, this is a lead sound, which I've just taken out of the library of sounds, this 16mm dream sequence sound, which is very nice, I think. And one thing about it that I particularly like and that I was drawn to when I first saw it is that its reverb, which is in the collection of channel strip plugins that are being used, includes SilverVerb. Now, 250 million years ago, in that area of man, this was the reverb that existed in Logic Pro. This was, in fact, Logic Audio, I think it was called in those days. This is one of the prototype sort of artificial reverbs that exist within Logic, and I'm assuming that it's still in the program because, of course, there are people as old as me, imagine that, who are still using Logic, who might have legacy projects which still use SilverVerb. And here we've got this absolutely great sounding, kind of slightly cheap sounding reverb, which I really, really like. And it's doing a really nice job on this sound. Now that I've shone a light on it, we should hear this sound by itself. And what I'll do is to take out the reverb and then I'll punch it in halfway through and you can see whether or not you can hear the difference. Here's no reverb. And what's really nice is it's got this amazingly kind of aliasy, sort of slightly nasty quality in the decay phase, which I really like. It's really retro. It sounds like early digital reverb. And it turns out, you know what? I think there's a time and a place for that. And it's now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to think about what we did in the previous episode in terms of being able to think about capturing a reverb by itself. And of course, there's no way for me to do that if this plugin remains in channel. It's part of a whole collection of other effects, and that's not what I want. I want to be in a position where I can isolate the reverb so that I can turn it into an audio file. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a new auxiliary bus. Is bus 1 being used? No, it's not. Okay, so we're going to use bus 1. I'm going to turn up the send level to it. And what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to duplicate this reverb from one channel across the auxiliary bus. And I'm doing that by holding down Option at the same time as dragging it. I'm going to bypass the original, which is the one we're looking at right now. And then what I'm going to do is to reopen the one or the auxiliary bus, which will be an absolute copy of it. It's exactly the same collection of settings, but of course now I only need this to contain the wet signal because it's an auxiliary effect. The dry signal is coming from the channel. This is now only going to provide reverb for it. Now, by turning the wet level up, it's possible that I'm now going to make the reverb louder than it was on the original sound, but that's okay. We're going to turn it into an audio file and then we'll be in a position to balance it. But let's just check that it is now making the noise we hope it will be. And sure enough, that's fine. Okay, so how are we now going to turn this into an audio file? Well, firstly, I'm actually going to just label this. So this is SilverVerb. Hello, old friend. How have you been? Okay, what we're going to do next is to come into the mixer. We're going to solo this channel, and we should now just hear that this is Reverb by itself. Sure enough. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a loop around this sequence. Now this has got a really long decay. So again, I'm going to take a bit of a punt and I'm going to guess that it probably ends around here-ish. Who knows? I'm keen not to cut the end off, but nevertheless, we'll deal with that if it happens. And then what I'm going to do is to press the bounce button. And what that gives me a chance to do, firstly, is to make sure that I'm going to be adding this reverb track, this new file that we're going to be creating to my project. And then all I need to do is to press OK. We'll bounce it in real time so we can hear it being captured as it goes down. And then, as I've mentioned before, what I tend to do with audio files is to put them in the audio files folder rather than bounces, which is where it will default to. And what I'm going to do is just give it a name. So this is going to be our SilverVerb. And then what I'm going to do is to bounce it. Amazing. I think it actually still might just be making a bit of noise at bar 14, but that's okay. We're going to be all right, I think. Okay, so now we need to make sure that what we're doing is we're switching off the SilverVerb from the original channel. Remember, what I'm about to do is to bring this audio file in. So the audio file is going to play the reverb. So we're not going to need it to be triggered directly from this channel anymore. At least for now, we're not. What I'm then going to do is to get rid of the mixer for a moment, and we'll come and find this audio file, which should be waiting for us over here, alongside the other audio that exists within this project, which has been taken from the Apple Loops library. So when I drag this across into this space, what we're going to discover, of course, is that we've got our reverb. I'm going to put it in underneath the sound that's triggering it. We'll need to make sure that we are soloing, or turning off the solos, I should say, for everything, and then I'll just solo these two things. So we should find this is reverb by itself, and if it is, then I'll punch it in with the lead, and we should then be able to create a balance between those two instruments. Okay, now before we go any further, a sound like this, in a mix like this, one thing that we looked at in the percussive version of this idea of turning audio files into kind of more instruments, or thinking about them more as instruments, was to use fades. And actually a thing that would be really nice on a sound like this with a reverb like this would be to create a kind of sort of compressed sound, almost like a kind of ducking technique. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chop the end off this file. I'm going to chop it up in minims, in half notes, and then what I'm going to do is take a rough guess that a fade in of, where are we? It's going to be 600 milliseconds ish, a bit longer than that. So let's make it 800. Bad guessing. More like 1,000, in fact. There we go. Is going to give us a little fade in on every single region, and if I put a tiny fade out on them as well, that'll create a nice effect, I think. So that's one way that we could treat this audio file, but it's not what we're here for. No, it's not. What I'm going to do is to take all of those fades off, completely, and I'm also going to take all of these slices away, and I'm going to restore my reverb to its original glorious length. And actually, I'm going to turn its volume up for just a moment because I'm enjoying its volume for a moment. Now, as we know with audio files, with any audio file, if I click and hold on an audio file, I'm going to drag it down here for a moment, and then I'm going to take it left into the main track area. What I have a chance to do is to drop it on a number of different instruments, and what will happen is that it will immediately be sampled. It can either be sampled into the quick sampler, or it can be sampled into Drum Machine Designer, or of course it can be sampled into Sample Alchemy, and that's definitely where I'm going with a sound like this. I want to turn this into an instrument, and the moment I release on this instrument, let's turn all the solos off so I can actually hear this sound, what we're going to discover is that Logic has sampled it but into this granular synthesis engine. Now, it turns out Sample Alchemy can actually produce different types of synthesis, not just granular, but additive and spectral, but it's the granular module that I'm going to go for today. Now, what this allows me to do is to think about playing this sound back, but through a sampling technique, which effectively imagines every little slice of audio, every snapshot of audio as what's referred to as a grain. And we can do interesting things with grains. We can change their sizes so that we get sounds that literally sound grainy, sort of almost like a black and white photograph, which has been sort of blown up and heavily pixelated, or something which is a little bit more smooth and something that, yeah, just plays back a little bit more like a sample. And yet, rather than the kind of crystalline, perfect qualities that we get from high quality sampling, there's just going to be something a little bit lo-fi and smudgy about this, which I think is a really appealing sound. Now, I've made videos about Sample Alchemy, so I'm not going to linger on this for too long, but we do have 5 separate modes for playing sounds back, starting with classic mode, which will do what samplers always do, which is to play a sound for as long as I hold my finger down. Now remember, this sound isn't the original dream sequence lead, it's the reverb is the thing that I've sampled. So the reason why it sounds washed out is because it is just reverb. So the first thing I can do is create this kind of cascading effect of just triggering it in different places. And that might be fun, and we'll try that in a minute. But what I can also do is I can move upwards and downwards within this interface to change the size of the grains. You can see that the size dial here is going to change as I move upwards and downwards within the interface. And what that's going to do is to change how the sound feels as we listen to it back. And it's really nice to kind of scrub across this interface as well, and to find the little bits that are kind of active and interesting. And in fact, that's giving me an interesting idea straight away. I'm going to come straight out of classic mode for a moment, and I'm going to come to loop mode instead. Now, the moment I click on that button, Sample Alchemy is going to show me the length of loop that it wants to create. But of course, I'm in a position to make that anything I want. I could decide, for instance, that I only want the loop speed to play back over the first gesture of this melody. So that's what it's going to do. And that might be quite interesting in terms of actually creating a few little answering phrases for this sound. What I'm going to do is to turn off the original reverb bounce. Remember, we've now sampled that sound. So effectively, we've replaced the audio file version with the Sample Alchemy version instead. But what I am going to do is to put SilverVerb back in channel where it was originally, so that we're getting the reverberant version of the original sound. And then what I'm going to do is to just start to see what happens when I throw a few of these little triggers in as answering phrases. It helps if I do that on the right instrument, doesn't it? And in fact, I wonder what would happen if I also introduce the second loop too, so that the second time round it comes in, it's its own echo. Let's try that. I'm going to record it this time. And that's quite nice. One thing I could do would be to increase the release time so that that hangs around a little bit longer than it is at the moment. It's cutting off very short at the moment. Of course, the other thing to say is that I could send it to bus number 1, where the SilverVerb treatment is waiting. And of course, that will now add this reverb sound to itself. Pop will eat itself. So that release time is working nicely on that second chord. I'd need to adjust the length of that note because I'm just hearing the ghost of that second chord happening the first time round that it plays. So that's one thing that I could do. I wonder what would happen though if what I did was to delete that region for a second and to start thinking about this loop backwards. So one thing I can do within Sample Alchemy is to say, okay, well, I want the loop to start wherever the letter is. But what I can then do is to take the end point and make it happen before the start point, which means it will play backwards. And that might be really nice. In fact, I think I need to start that a bit earlier. So I can put these nice little reversed moments, which are taken from, as I say, a reversed version of that first chord's reverb. Down the rabbit hole we go. So that's nice too. I wonder though whether or not we could almost even think about extending the harmony of the whole phrase by having the whole phrase's reverb play backwards as the phrase plays forwards. So what that would involve is moving the start point to the end of the phrase, which I guess is going to be there. It's one thing to audition it. Let's play it. Well, that's really nice too. Now, if I really wanted to be incredibly detailed about it, I would quantize that. And that means that, provided I've got my loop point in exactly the right place, and I think I have because it's snapping to that grid line, it means it's absolutely going to start in time, which means, you know, it's gonna sync up a little bit better in terms of that loop being exactly the right length. But speaking of loop length, I think that this parameter here, the loop speed, allows me to change the playback speed of this loop. So what happens if I double it? Ooh, wow, I can go up to 400%. That's interesting. Let's see if I can select 200%. Yes, I can. Okay, let's try that by itself. For those of you who know the plugin, it sounds a bit like pull stretch, doesn't it? feels so cruel to have discovered that 400% exists and we're not going to use it. Let's fix that now. That's nice. I'm also going to just try one more at 50% speed. It's playing at the wrong speed. Okay, let's try the slow version. Oh, it's a twitchy little dial. Let's try that. That's my favorite. So what we've now got is this kind of weird wonky treatment, which is working really nicely. Well, I kind of really like that, and I want to save that or make that part of my project. Save. But what I also want to do is to be in a position where I can make a different kind of manipulated version of this sound too. So what I'm actually going to do is to take this SilverVerb treatment, which remember is called SilverVerb 2, but this is actually Sample Alchemy, and it's a reversed half speed loop. Can you hear the speed at which my brain works as I'm labeling that file? And then what I'm going to do is to duplicate it, and that's going to give me exactly the same instrument all over again, but of course with the advantage of the fact that I can now make a different version of this, and of course I can make as many versions as I like. One thing I might decide to do would be to say, okay, well, what does the kind of scrub feature allow me to do? Well, what that's doing is it's providing this amazingly rapid fire little loop around just one particular area of this file. And again, if I come towards the end where we've got a long decay tail, I might find a sound here I could actually play. And what I'm wondering is what happens if I take the original lead sound and assign it to this instrument instead. Let's take it up the octave. So we get a ghost of the kind of chord that is present in this reverb at this time, but it's kind of nice, isn't it? Let's make the decay time a bit longer so it's just sticking around. And with the original, I do really like that. I'm going to make that transposition offset a permanent one. And what I'm also going to do is to select every note in here, and I'm going to transpose it up an octave. So I've just done that by taking it up one semitone, and then up an octave, and then down a semitone. That's really nice. And with the looped version, and with the whole track. Now, one thing to say is that whilst this is really lovely, obviously all of these sounds are being taken from the same sort of harmonic footprint. They're all coming from that first reverb. So I definitely would, I think, recommend thinking about them as individual sounds and looking to, in some way, make sure that they're not all conflating right in the middle of the mix and with exactly that same harmonic footprint. So I think I would be tempted to come to this kind of looped slow version and maybe make it a bit more stereo. I might come to the tremolo plugin, which I've got in my most recent 5 used plugins, but you'll probably find, well, you will definitely find it, no probably about it. You'll find it in the modulation section right here at the bottom. And one thing that might be quite fun would be to take off the synchronization and to potentially even automate the speed of this. So you went from something which was really slow to something a bit faster in the gaps. Might just do that now without even listening to the other parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the tremolo speed so that at the end of every 2 bars, it rapidly picks up and then drops again. I think that's what I want. So what that's going to do is to give us a little bit of movement on that sound while the other ones occupy the middle of the mix. And that's just one way that I can separate those sounds. I can do anything with it. And the other thing that really is tempting to use on a sound like that would be a bit crusher, I think, just to give it its own flavor. But you can begin to see that across now 2 videos, but in this one in particular, we've started introducing the idea of kind of harmonic complexity to what we can do with reverbs. The idea of taking these things that, as I say, usually act as static layers within our mixes, entirely dependent on the sounds that feed them in order to simply make a noise, and to make them much more proactive elements within our mix. What we can do is to bring them in, and as we've already discovered, chop up that audio file, apply fades, do all kinds of things, apply audio processing. But what we can also do is just sample reverbs so that they can act as drones, textures, reversed elements, new little pitched counter melody ideas triggered at different times and different speeds. The world's your oyster in terms of where you can actually take sounds like this. And this is, by the way, just Sample Alchemy. You could take this reverb into Drum Machine Designer and chop it up into different pad slices. You could take it into the sampler instrument itself and create multi-layered instruments out of different versions of this. My word, where can we go next?